In this video, we're going to discuss the strain gauge construction and bonding. So specifically, how is a typical strain gauge? What does a typical strain gauge look like? What are some of the prominent components of a strain gauge, and how do we attach a strain gauge to the specimen we're interested in measuring the strain on? So typically, the length of our strain gauge, all right, is typically defined as the length of the different loops of our wire. All right, and then so this is the area that's we're measuring the strain within this region along this axis. Okay, um, so um, so when we're typically will apply our strain gauge in the direction or relative to the direction that we're interested in measuring on our component. All right, the backing of our strain gauge, all right, is what's shown here outside of the solder tabs where you connect the wires out to your measuring device. All right, and the backing has two functions. It isolates the metallic gauge from the specimen, and it transmits the strain from the specimen to the sensor. Now, the backing of the strain gauge is typically bonded or glued to the specimen, so that bonding typically has some type of mechanical coupling. So the idea is that it is designed to match the strain observed within the surface of the specimen, basically. So it has this. The strain gauge should measure the same strain that's experienced by the specimen itself. And for thermal coupling, basically there should be good heat transfer so that whatever temperature the specimen is at, the strain gauge is also at that same temperature. So some examples of strain gauges are of bondings that are used to bond strain gauges to. Specimens are epoxy, all right, which can be used at high temperature cellulose nitrate, which is super glue, all right, and then ceramic-based cements all can be used, all right, and depends on what type of specimen you're testing, but that's how. In general, these are the types of glues that you would use in order to couple your strain gauge to the specimen, right? And then the last thing is that depending on what type of strains you're interested in measuring, you may use different types of strain gauges that may have multiple. Some of them may have multiple gauges, like the ones that are shown on the right have 3, and then some of these on the left-hand side they have multiple gauges, right? Like these two here. All right. So, so that concludes what a strain gauge typically looks like, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what a gauge factor is in the next video.